Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ISAS. Since it's Singapore's 53rd National Day tomorrow, we thought we'll talk to our Director, Professor Raja Mohan, on the importance and the context of Singapore and South Asia relations and where that might take us forward for the next 12 months from here. So, Prof. Raja Mohan, um, perhaps you can talk a bit about the historical context between Singapore and South Asia and how far back that goes and how that has impacted relations till today.
First, I think on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, let me wish everyone a very happy National Day in Singapore. In terms of the historical context, I think it's quite well known that the evolution of modern Singapore had a significant role of the subcontinent within it. That Singapore was founded by the British, by the East India Company, based in India, and the undivided subcontinent had a deep connections to the evolution of modern Singapore. Even after Singapore was separated, that is, the Straits Settlement got separated from British India, the nature of the linkages remained pretty strong. And in the Second World War, as you know, that the Indian Army, undivided Indian Army, came back to push the Japanese out of Singapore, take surrender of the Japanese troops. So it's a long story of where our evolution was interlinked deeply. And I think in the current age, if South Asia contributed to the evolution of Singapore, in the last 30 to 40 years, it's really Singapore today has become a very critical point for the modernization of the economies of South Asia, and Singapore has played a very special role in the opening up and the reform of the Indian economy since 1992, and Singapore shepherded India's integration and South Asia's integration more broadly with the ASEAN and the related structures in East Asia.
Great. But in today's context, though, and certainly in the future, do you see that Singapore still being relevant to South Asia?
Absolutely. Singapore might be small, but I think as a global innovation hub today, Singapore is going to be, in many ways, I think, a destination, a location for interesting innovators from South Asia who are working in Singapore. And Singapore's innovation ecosystem can be used to scale up the digitalization of the economy of South Asia. So there is, I think, a natural complementarity here between Singapore as an innovation hub and South Asia with its scale actually today can come together to focus on the new fourth industrial revolution of how do we use innovation to leapfrog. In South Asia, we need to leapfrog a whole range of areas from building smart cities to healthcare. So I think Singapore is going to have a huge role in the future of South Asian economic and social modernization.
Certainly, that looks promising. In your opinion, what are some of the opportunities and challenges for Singapore in deepening engagement with South Asian countries in the next year?
Yeah, we've already seen, for example, recently Singapore and Sri Lanka have signed a free trade agreement, and recently some Singapore businessmen have visited Bangladesh. So today South Asia is becoming one of the fastest growing regions of the world. And many of the people in South Asia, the businessmen, look to Singapore both for the ease of doing business here and as a gateway to the larger world. While Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis look to the Dubai on the other side, Singapore is many ways the eastern gateway for India's engagement and South Asia's engagement with the world. So as we look ahead, trade is one dimension. I just mentioned Sri Lanka, Singapore, FTA, and the other is the new economy, where, as I mentioned, Singapore as a digital innovation hub brings a whole lot of potential for advancing South Asian economies.
Right. So we have seen a new high for Singapore's relations with South Asia this year, and as you mentioned, the signing of the Singapore-Sri Lanka FTA was one of such example. Also with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Singapore this year, where there were agreements signed on cooperation in innovation and digitalization, and his subsequent speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue. So will we see more of the same in the next 12 months?
I would certainly hope so. I think Prime Minister Modi came here. I think there were two aspects to the visit. One, as you rightly mentioned, there was a lot of emphasis on innovation Prime Minister went to the Nanyang Technological University. Then he did this integration of the Indian RuPay card into the net system in Singapore. So I think we're at the beginning of a process where the financial markets of India and Singapore can be connected. And Singapore then becomes a much larger, provides a much larger framework for integration of India into the ASEAN digital economy. We're seeing ASEAN as a whole making a big push for digitalization, and I think India, as it strengthens relationship with Singapore on the digital side, it can use this as a boost to reach the rest of the ASEAN region. The second is the security. I mean, I think the region is going through a turbulent phase. We've seen uncertainties in US and Chinese evolution. So there's a lot of need for strengthening security cooperation. Here I think Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked about India's role in promoting ASEAN centrality, in strengthening a security system here that is going to be built around the ASEAN. So therefore, both on the political security on the one hand and the economic on the other, Singapore, I think, relations with South Asia are going to be quite crucial in the coming 12 months.
Certainly, I hope we can sit here next year for next year's National Day and look back at a strengthening of a mutually beneficial relationship.
Absolutely, and once again, happy National Day.
Thank you, Prof.